Clients notice far less than you ever think they do. Not because they don't care, but because they're not looking at the work with the same level of experience you are. They're asking much simpler questions. Does this do what I need it to do? Does it feel right? And can I move on? And there's another mistake wrapped up in all of this. A lot of freelancers still think they can outwork everyone else. That mindset, again, kind of makes sense in corporate jobs because there's a boss, there's visibility, and effort gets noticed. But freelancing isn't a competitive space like that. No one is looking over your shoulder. No one is counting your hours. Overworking doesn't impress anyone. Results do. And the only person who thinks you should be working harder is the voice in your own head trying to justify charging a stranger for the work you're doing. I think it's the biggest reason why so many try freelancing and quit. They spend too long on projects. They look at the hours and think, this isn't worth it. And they tell themselves things like, well, clients just want everything done for cheap. But the problem is not the client. It's that they're still guessing what matters. And that's because they haven't done enough jobs yet to understand what clients actually value. There's another more important thing that shows up here. A lot of freelancers feel the need to prove that they've actually made a difference. They want the client to look at the work and think, oh yeah, I see the difference. It's clear. So they overcompensate for that. Let's take video editing again. So, I see people, video editors and audio editors, they'll push things like color grading or EQ on audio so that it's quite obviously different. They make changes that are visible, but not necessarily valuable because subtle work to them feels risky. And if the improvement isn't obvious in their eyes, then it feels like you might not be justified for charging for it. But the irony is the best work is usually invisible. Again, good editing, it doesn't draw attention to itself. You don't notice it. Good design doesn't announce itself. When the work is done well, the client doesn't think about what you changed. They just feel like things are easier now. And when you try and make work stand out too much, you just make it worse. The urge to prove yourself, the urge to prove that you've earned the fee isn't professionalism. It's the same voice trying to justify your value. So here's the distinction that most freelancers miss. The answer isn't to ask a client 100 questions or to look to them to make every decision. They're not paying you to outsource judgment back to them. They're paying you for your judgment. So yes, you should check expectations and you should clearly clarify outcomes. But if a client is vague about how they want something done, it usually means they just want you to decide. That's not a problem, that's an opportunity. Your job is to do what you believe is good work based on your experience and within a time that reflects the price you've charged. That's how you qualify clients. If they're happy, you've found alignment. And if you overwork and polish everything endlessly and then they say nothing, they just say they're happy, you might have just set a standard that you never needed to set. They may have equally been happy with half the amount of work done. This is what you always got to focus on. How much have you charged? And how good can you make the work in a time frame that gives you an acceptable hourly rate? And early on, yes, things take longer as part of learning and you give some space for that. But there's a difference between learning and working in vain. Talent is not working on it all day long, for as many hours as the day allows. That is a recipe for disaster when it comes to freelancing and business in general. And most overworking comes from one mistake: trying to remove every possible reason for judgment. Good work doesn't come from checklists. It comes from instinct. And most introverted freelancers already have good instinct. They just sometimes stop trusting it when a client is involved. So before you do anything extra on a job, always pause and ask yourself, was this asked for? Was this agreed? Would I actually do this if this was my work? And if the answer is no, then that work doesn't belong to you. Introverted freelancers don't need to work harder. They just need clear boundaries and they need to trust themselves more.